Okay, we're doing another video series on our worldly wisdom, worldly sayings, things like that. Here's one that you'll hear. Jesus made wine. And basically the impression is, since Jesus made alcohol, it's okay to drink alcohol. Well, let me give you three simple reasons why this isn't the case. Why, number one, why Jesus didn't make alcoholic wine, and number two, why we should not drink alcohol. Okay, so number one, the word wine in the Bible does not always mean alcohol. Now, when we hear the word wine, we usually automatically think of, alcoholic wine. Okay, well, the word wine does in the Bible, in older English, it doesn't always mean alcohol. Okay. To give you some examples, Welch's back in the day, they used to sell. They had their grape juice, and I've seen I've heard about it. Basically, the bottle, or the I don't know if they were bottles or what they had them in, but they would say Welch's unfermented wine. Okay, so that's just a kind of a example in the English language. But there's actually some biblical examples that we can look at really quick. So here's one in 2 Chronicles, okay, chapter 31, verse 5. Here's what it says. As soon as the commandment came abroad, the children of Israel brought in abundance the first fruits of corn, wine, and oil, and honey, and all the increase of the field, and the tithe of all things brought they in abundantly. So it's talking about they would bring in the grapes, they would press them out, and they had wine. They called it wine. Now, this was obviously in a short time, so it wasn't fermented alcoholic wine. Okay, but here's another one. In the book of Nehemiah, chapter 13, verse 15. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs. So notice that the juice that's being pressed is being called wine. Okay, it's not wine that's been fermented. It's just the juice that's coming out. Okay, now probably I think here's the easiest one, the clearest one that gives us an illustration. It's in Isaiah chapter 16. It's in verse 10. Okay. Gladness is taken away, and joy out of the plentiful field and in the vineyards. There shall be no singing, neither shall there be shouting. The treaders shall tread out no wine in their presses. Okay, see, you don't tread out alcoholic wine in a wine press. You get grape juice. Okay, so wine can be called, in the Bible, is not necessarily alcoholic. Okay. So in John chapter 2, we're told the story of Jesus. Basically, he goes to a banquet or a wedding, and there's a banquet, and they run out of wine, which I believe is grape juice. And Jesus turns the water into wine. The Bible says that when the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, okay, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom and saith unto him, every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse. But thou hast kept the good wine until now. Okay, so they brought out wine. Okay, and it was grape juice though, and the people had all been drinking this wine. Okay, now if you give a bunch of people alcoholic wine, and you bring them out newer, higher quality alcoholic wine, because they're already drunk, they're probably not going to really recognize that it's all that great. Okay, if you've never drunk before, it's hard to understand it. But when you're drunk on alcohol, your senses are kind of gone. Like you're not really all there. So it's obvious that it's not alcoholic wine, because they wouldn't have even noticed. Okay. Anyway, now you got to look at the context to determine in the Bible if it's good, if it's alcoholic or not alcoholic. Like, the first mention of drunkenness is with Noah drinks wine, gets drunk, and his son ends up doing some basically sexual immorality with him while he's drunk. Obviously, it's alcohol. Lot got drunk off of wine, and he committed incest with his daughters because he was intoxicated. So you have to look at the context. So number one, the word wine doesn't always mean alcohol. I got to get through these quickly. Number two, the Bible commands sobriety. The Bible says, be sober, be vigilant, for your adversary, the devil, walketh about as a lion, seeking whom he may devour. Ephesians 5:19 says, be not drunk with wine, where is in excess, but be filled with the Spirit. So the Bible commands sobriety. And sobriety is being sober. And so, I mean, you could argue, well, I'm not getting drunk, whatever. Okay, but Proverbs 20 verse 1 says, wine is a mocker, and strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. Wine can deceive people. You know how it deceives you? You think it's harmless. You play with it. Drinking wine is like going up and cuddling up to like a snake. It's gonna bite you like a serpent. Okay, so alcohol is not something to play around with. It will ruin your life. It will destroy your life. It will destroy your moral character. It will destroy your family. It will just destroy your spiritual life. And if you're not saved, it's going to take you to hell. Alcohol, getting drunk is a sin. It's rebellion against God. God commands us not to get drunk, but to be sober. Okay, so lastly, Jesus is holy, okay? Now, the Bible says in Habakkuk that, woe unto the man that giveth his neighbor drink. But people think that Jesus is going to make wine and give it to a bunch of people who are already drunk. No, Jesus and Jesus didn't drink alcohol either, because the Bible says that kings are not supposed to drink wine, and neither are priests. And Jesus is both a king and he's our high priest. And Jesus didn't come to mock people. The Bible says wine is a mocker. So you think Jesus is going to come to this wedding where all these people are drunk and give them something that's going to mock them even more? No. And alcohol leads people to hell. Isaiah chapter 5 verse 11 talks about how because the people drink, hell has enlarged itself. And Jesus didn't come to be a stumbling block, okay? Romans 14 talks about how we shouldn't be a stumbling block. Jesus isn't going to come to all these people who are drunk and put something in front of them that's going to increase their drunkenness, because God does not command drunkenness. So, if you ever hear people say, oh, well, Jesus made wine, well, the first thing you got to realize is, number one, he didn't make alcoholic wine. And number two, alcohol and drunkenness is clearly condemned in the Bible. And I believe that there is no good reason, no profitable reason to drink alcohol. I don't believe the Bible, for the New Testament believer, makes any allowance for recreational alcohol drinking. But I'm not really getting into that. I just wanted to clear up that Jesus did not make alcoholic wine. And even if he did, and he didn't, but even if he did, there are still plenty of clear commands in the Bible to condemn alcohol. Thanks.